Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 31. The Treasure Hunt. Flint's Pointer. "Jim," said Silver, when we were alone, "if I saved your life, you've saved mine, and I'll not forget it. I've seen the doctor waving you to run for it, with the tail of my eye, I did. And I've seen you say no, as plain as hearing, Jim. That's one to you. This is the first glimpse of hope I had since the attack failed, and I owe it to you. And now, Jim, we're to go in for this here treasure hunting, with sealed orders, too, and I don't like it, and you and me must stick close, back to back like, and we'll save our necks in spite of fate and fortune." Just then a man hailed us from the fire that breakfast was ready, and we were soon seated here and there about the sand over biscuit and fried junk. They had lit a fire fit to roast an ox, but it was grown so hot that they could only approach it from the windward, and there not even without precaution, in the same wasteful spirit, they had cooked, I suppose, 3 times more than we could eat, and one of them, with an empty laugh, threw what was left into the fire, which blazed and roared again over this unusual fuel. I never in my life saw men so carelessly of the morrow. Hand to mouth is the only word that I can describe their way of doing, and what with wasted food and sleeping sentries, though they were bold enough for a brush and done with it, I could see their entire unfitness for anything like a prolonged campaign. Even Silver, eating away with Captain Flint upon his shoulder, did not had not a word to blame for their recklessness, and this the more surprised me, for I thought he had never shown himself so cunning as he did then. "Aye, mates," said he, "it's lucky you have a barbecue to thank you for you with this here head, and what I wanted, I did, sure enough. They have the ship. Where we have it, I don't know yet, but once we hit that treasure, we'll have to jump about and find out. Then, mates, us has that the boat. I reckon as the upper hand." Thus he running on, with his mouth full of hot bacon. Thus he restored his hope and confidence, and I more than suspected, repaired of his own at the same time. "As for hostage," he continued, "that is the last talk, I guess, and with them he loves so dear I got my piece o' news, and thank you for that, but it's over and done. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting, and we'll keep him like so much gold in case of accident. You mark. In the meantime, once we got the ship and treasure both, and we'll off to sea like jolly companions. And then, why, we'll talk to Mr. Hawkins over. We will, and give him his share, to be sure, for all his kindness." It was no wonder the men were in good humour now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. In the scheme he had now proved feasible. Silver, also doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He still had a foot in either camp, and there was no doubt that he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape of hanging, which was the best he could hope to our side. Nay, even if the things so fell out he was forced to his faith with Dr. Livesey. And even then, what danger lay before us! What a moment that would be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life. He a cripple, and I a boy, against 5 strong active seamen. Add to this double apprehension, the mystery that still hung over the behaviour of my friends. Their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable cession of the chart, or, harder still to understand, the doctor's last warning to Silver, "Look out for the squalls when you find it," and you will readily believe how little taste I found my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my captors on the quest for treasure. We made a curious figure, and had anyone been there to see us, all in soiled sailor clothes, all but me, armed to the teeth. Silver had 2 guns slung about him, one before and one behind, besides a great cutlass at his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder and gabbling odds and ends of the purposelessness sea talk. I had a line about my waist, and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held a loose end of the rope, and now his free hand, now bearing between his powerful teeth. For all the world I was led to a dancing bear. The other men were variously burthened, and some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been very first necessary they brought ashore from the Hispaniola. The others laden with pork, bread, and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores, I observed, came from stock, and I could see the truth of Silver words the night before. He had not struck a bargain with the doctor. He and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on the clear water, and proceed on their hunting. The water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot, and besides all that, when they were so short of edibles, it was not likely that they would be very flush of powder. Well, thus equipped, we all set out, even the fellow with a broken head, who should certainly have kept in the shadows and struggled, one after another, to the beach, where the two gigs awaited us. Even these bore traces of the drunken folly of the pirates, in a broken thwart, in both in their muddled and unbuilt conditions, were carried out along us, and for the sake of safety, and so, with our numbers divided between them, we set forth on the bosom of our anchorage. As we pulled over, there was some discussion on the chart, and Red Cross was, of course, far too little to be a guide. And the terms of the motor on the back, as you will hear, admitted us some ambiguity. They ran, in each of the and the reader may remember, thus: the tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the end of north-northeast. Skeleton Island, east-southeast, and by east, 10 feet. The tall tree was thus the principal mark. Now, right before us, the anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 2 to 300 feet high, adjoining on the north and the sloping southern shoulder of the spyglass, and rising again towards the south into the rough cliffy eminence called the mizzenmast hill. The top of the plateau was dotted thickly with pine trees, of varying height. Every here and there, one of the species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbors, and which of these was particularly the tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot, and by the readings of the compass. Yet although that was the favourite's case, every man on board the boat had picked the favourite of his own ear were half-way over. Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. We pulled easily by Silver's directions to not weary the hands prematurely, and after a quite long passage, landed on the mouth of the second river, that which runs down a woody cleft of the spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. At first onset, heavy, miry ground, in a matted marish at the first onset, greatly delayed our progress, but little by little and little the hill began to steep and become a stony underfoot, and the wood began to change its character and grow into a more open order. It was, indeed, a most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching. A heavy scented broom and many flowering shrubs had almost taken the place of grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns in the broad shadow of the pines, and first mingled their spice with aromas of others. The air, besides, was fresh and stirring, and this, under the sheets of the sunbeams, was a wonderful refreshment to our senses. And the party spread abroad spread itself abroad in a fan shape, shouting and leaping to and fro about the centre, in a good way behind the rest of the rest. Silver and I followed. I tethered a rope, he ploughing with his deep hands among the sliding gravel from time to time. Indeed, I had to lend him a hand, or he must have missed his footing. Thus we proceeded for about half a mile, and we were approaching the brows of the plateau when a man on the farthest left began to cry aloud, as if in terror. Shout after shout came from him, and all the others began to run in his direction. "He can't have found a treasure," said old Morgan, hurrying past us, "for that's a clean atop." Indeed, as we reached the top, it was something very different. At the foot of the pretty pine, involved in the green creeper, and even something lifted of the smaller bones, a human skeleton lay, with a few shreds of clothing, on the ground. I believe a thrill struck for the moment to every heart. "He was a seaman," said George Merry, who, bolder than the rest, had gone up close, and examining the rags of clothing. "Leastways, this is good sea-cloth." "Aye, aye," said Silver. "Like enough, you wouldn't look to find a bishop there, I reckon. But what sort of a way is that for bones to lie? 'Tain't in nature." Indeed, on a second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy that the body was in a natural position. But for some disarray, the work, perhaps of the birds, had fed upon him, or the slow-growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains. The man lay perfectly straight, his head pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head, and above like a diver, and pointing directly in the opposite. "I've taken a notion into my old numbskull," observed Silver. "Here's the compass. There's a tip-top point o' Skeleton Island, sticking out like a tooth. Just take a bearing, will you, along the line of them bones." It was done. The body pointed straight into the direction of the island, and the compass read duly east-south-east, and by east. "I thought so," cried the cook. "Here's the pointer, and right up there's our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars. But, by thunder, if it don't make me cold inside to think of Flint, this is one of his jokes. No mistake. Him and these six alone here. He killed 'em, every man, and this one he hauled here and laid down by compass. Shiver my timbers, they were long bones, and the hair's been yellow. Aye, what that been Addlediss. You mind Alardis, Tom Morgan?" "Aye, aye," returned Morgan. "I mind him. He owed me money, he did, and he took my knife ashore with him." "Speaking of knives," said another, "why don't we find his'n lying around? Flint warned the man to pick up a seaman's pocket, and by the burrs, I guess would leave it be." "And by powers, and that's true!" cried Silver. "There ain't a thing left here," cried Mary, still feeling round among the bones. "Not a copper dot, nor a baccy box. It all lookin' natural to me." "No, by gum, it does," agreed Silver. "Not natural." "Nor nice, says you. Great guns, messmate, but if Flint was livin', this thing would be a hot spot for you and me. Six they were, and six are we, and the bones is what they are now." "I saw him dead with these here deadlights," said Morgan. "Billy took me in. There he laid, with the penny pieces on his eyes." "Dead, eh? Sure enough he's dead, and gone below," said the fellow with the bandage. "But if ever a spirit walked it would be Flint. Dear heart, and he died bad, did Flint." "Aye, that he did," observed another. "Now he raged and hollered for the rum, and now he sang. 15 men were his only song, mates, and I tell you true, I never rightly liked to hear it since. It was a main hot, and the windy was open, and I like to hear that old song comin' out as clear, and death haul on the man already." "Come, come," said Silver, "stow this talk. He's dead and we don't walk. That I know. Leastways, he won't walk by day, and you may lay to that. Care kill the cat. Fetch ahead for the double balloons. We'll start, certainly, but in spite of the hot sun and the staring daylight, the pirates no longer ran separate and shouting through the woods, but kept side by side and spoke with bated breaths. The terror of the buccaneer had fallen on their spirits.